And we are now live on Facebook. Good evening, everyone, and possibly good morning, Katie. Today we are joined by Katie Raver, who is in Texas in the US. Thank you for joining us, Katie. It's lovely to see you again. We were just saying after a number of years since we last met up. So thank you for joining us, and do tell us that you're presenting at the conference in May. Do tell us a little bit more about yourself, first of all.
Oh, thank you, Karen and Cash. It's so nice to be in y'all's presence. And okay, I'll make it brief and I'll kind of tell a story because I really want to talk about night walking and the presentation. So I studied NLP in Texas under Tom and Bobby Best. I worked with them for a decade. And at the end of most of Tom's training, he would read from this funny little storybook called The Structure of Delight. And it's all metaphors written by Nelson Zink, the guy who also created NightWalking. And these stories are basically the whole NLP practitioner training told in story. There's no analysis, there's no techniques, but it's all stories about the American Southwest and a young man named Jay and an interesting mystical character named Noom. So Tom, at the end of our NLP classes, when we were all tired from training, he would read us a story from this book. So that's how I first came to hear about Nelson Zink and some of the principles of night walking and everything else. So I took practitioner training, master practitioner, started working with Tom and Bobby Best and organizing their Texas classes and a meetup here. And I got to work with them for a decade until Tom suddenly passed away 9 years ago. And my life plan at that point was to be his assistant forever. And so then I realized I couldn't, and I took trainers training in Brazil and started continuing his work in a bigger way. Through that, all through that, I used the principles, the ideas, the techniques in the Structure of Delight. I started night walking to help with my own anxiety. And I would write the author, Nelson Zink, these giant fangirl notes, emails about, I used the 12 states of attention. It was so awesome. Here's what the students did. Or we used the, sending an experience over the horizon experience. Here's what they did with it. And he would always write me back one sentence, a single sentence. That's all. And it was always very cryptic and like a riddle. And so I'd get the sentence back and I would go, oh yes, this makes so much sense. So I didn't, at that time, Nelson was mostly retired. He wasn't actively teaching NLP or night walking or anything anymore. And, I tried to connect with him in other ways. And he was just off on other adventures, like we get to. And so time passed, Tom passed away, and I happened to be in Taos, New Mexico, where I thought that Nelson lived. I wasn't sure. And it's a beautiful place with mountains, with the American Southwest desert. It's a place where there's still a lot of dark skies. And when you go outside, it's so dry. If you go outside at night on a night with no moon, you look up and it's like another world. It's totally different than what you see in a city. And I was watching the sky one night and I saw a huge green shooting star. It was so bright. I could hear it. I could smell it. And that night I just wrote Nelson one sentence. I said, I saw that shooting star. Then maybe it was a Jedi move. Maybe I just hit him on the right day. He wrote back to me and said, well, why don't you come over tomorrow night, meet my wife, Chalona. We'll go night walking in the desert. And, he wrote me a big, long note back. So that was the beginning of some really amazing experiences. And that night walk is still one of my favorites. You know, when we use our peripheral vision to walk at night without artificial light, we become part of the night. We it's a different state physiologically and in all other ways. And it's useful for anti-anxiety. It's useful for a trainer state or a coaching state. And it's also probably a state that we should visit more often for our own health. So that's a little bit about how I came to meet Nelson's Inc. and came to NightWalking and all this work.
So I mean, that sounds amazing and such a beautiful story, especially the green shooting star. So, I mean, your presentation at the conference is Introduction to NightWalking. And so you've told us a little bit about NightWalking. What else is there to tell us? And how is it relevant to NLP professionals?
Okay, yes, thank you. So NightWalking is walking at night without artificial light. And our eyes can see very, very well when we use our peripheral vision to do so. We can see extremely well at night when we use peripheral instead of our focused vision. So it is the states of mind, the states of being that come up when you're more peripheral are really enjoyable. And there are some things you can't do when you're peripheral. You can't do things like read text. You can't do things like talk to yourself really fast, like most of us do when we have intense anxiety. The internal dialogue quiets when we're more peripheral. So those are some ways that it's relevant to NLP practitioners and master practitioners and trainers. Probably if you're a trainer, you probably already use some form of broad vision, whether you've ever thought about it or not, because you have to be able to see the whole room and get feedback about when people are nodding or aren't showing not understanding or whatever's going on in the room. So night walking, though, the only way you can walk at night without artificial light is by using your peripheral vision and staying there. And because most of us live in urban settings where a lack of artificial light is very unusual, this takes practice because we see with our eye and brain together. So we need some practice in order to do that. So I've put together some exercises to allow people to go peripheral and stay there for more than just a snap second. And then that they can share with other people. They can use it in their own trainer state of being, or with coaching. And it's really useful to be able to guide a client into peripheral vision so that if they're having some challenges with anxiety, they have a tool to get themselves out of that. The other thing we'll be doing, which we'll have more time that day than we have today, is we'll be doing a virtual night walk. So when I first started showing Nelson's work and showing night walking, one of the problems I had in doing little intro talks was it takes a special place to go night walking. You can't, as with beginners, you can't just go anywhere, and it requires equipment and all kinds of stuff. So I needed a simple way to take people on a night walk and give them an experience of it. So I just developed using all the language of influence language, the Milton model language from NLP and Milton Erickson. I just developed a trance that's a virtual night walk that has all the physiological markers of being able to stay in peripheral vision longer and to see some neat things in nature. So the guided experiences about the American Southwest, people can fill in the blanks however they like. And that's often an enjoyable experience.
It sounds beautifully relaxing as well.
Hopefully.
So we could do with some of that. That sounds amazing. And I'm very, very intrigued as to creating a virtual night walk, because as soon as you started explaining about night walking, I was thinking, but we live in a town, that the chances of being able to find a light free area anywhere in sort of Western society, I think is fairly challenging. So I think that sounds really, really intriguing, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, there are a few pockets of dark in you know, in England and in Great Britain. It's hard though, because there's so much, I think there's a fair amount of humidity. So what I can see on the light pollution maps is if there's any light, it gets amplified if there's humidity. But there are some really special pockets of remaining darkness. And if anybody wants to poke around, the International Dark Sky Association has maps about those places. And you know, it's interesting that the night is something we have erased as people. And I think there's some really interesting reasons for that. And to be able to return to darkness as a resource, as those patterns of incubation or quietness or reflection, all those things that are about not doing, I think is really, really intriguing. And when we go night walking, we can completely see everything around us. We are walking around in the dark. Hopefully we're not stumbling around in the dark much, because we can literally see the path in front of us, everything to the left and right of the trail. And we can see the stars above. And if there's a moon, we can see our shadow in the moonlight. After we've been night walking a while, we can see our shadow in the starlight. And those are really special things that I think used to be really common human experiences and are special and unique now.
Yes, absolutely. So you've mentioned something about some of the techniques that you'll be talking about. So what will delegates take away from your session?
Hopefully they'll take away several different ways to help themselves and other people go into peripheral vision. And that's full peripheral vision, not just a broader state, but all the way peripheral. So they'll have several ways that they can take themselves and others into full peripheral vision and sustain it, so that they can see their students, if they're trainers, so that they can read other people better if they're coaches, and that they can help their clients go into a peripheral internal dialogue free state.
Sounds amazing. Definitely. So obviously this year the conference is a virtual experience, and we were chatting earlier about the pivoting into a virtual environment very quickly thanks to the pandemic. So how are you planning to add value in a virtual environment to the delegates?
Well, I love that y'all sent all of us presenters, you know, like how we want the session to go and the resources we need from the stewards. It's really amazing, and a lot of work on your side. Thank you for doing that. So one of the things you mentioned was having video on. So when I can see people, even in the virtual environment, I can tell if they're peripheral or not, and I can guide people. So one thing that people who've read some of the articles about night walking and peripheral vision, one thing they commonly say is, I'm just not getting the kind of experience that you're describing. And that tells me that's probably because they aren't all the way peripheral. So I can guide from my own calibration in that way. And then the other thing is we all can have powerful virtual rapport. And I think just bringing that belief and that experience is important for all of us, that we can connect this way. And I'm excited to see how that's done by many people and to contribute to.
Wonderful. And I think it was Robert Dilts that said that the beauty of having a virtual conference is that everybody has a front row seat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's really an egalitarian kind of force. As more and more people have access to reliable internet and can participate, it's a really special thing. Yeah, there's a time zone thing. So we're in Texas, we're 6 hours, you know, earlier in the day. So it's like a little after 11 a.m. here. And, you know, people will flex around that too. I've seen some interesting things happen with my virtual classes where people can join from all over.
Yes, absolutely. And the benefit of the virtual conference, that our conference platform, the recordings of every session will be available for 6 months afterwards. So
I saw that. That is like a crazy offer. That's so good. That's so intriguing. Because, you know, before, I can't remember how it was done a long time ago. It's been a while since I've been to the conference in person. But I know we didn't have that available to us. That's really special. Thanks for doing that.
It's been having to choose between all the wonderful sessions. And what I love about your session is it sounds like it's going to be one of those sessions that we may revisit many times over the 6 months to just bring ourselves into a more relaxed state, by the sounds of things. So.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the virtual night walk's good. The exercises, the guiding is good. And hopefully, if it's a good day, the stories will be good.
I'm sure it will. So, I mean, you just mentioned, you know, we met at the NLP conference many years ago, certainly before we took it over in 2017. What does the NLP International Conference mean to you?
Well, I think it was 2011 or so when I was there. Maybe it was 2012. We were trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And just to be able to meet the people that I've heard about my whole life and to have connections with them is unique and special.
Mm.
And what I found is that, you know, the NLP greats tend to be very down to earth and very warm and, you know, interested in connecting as well. And to just see that spirit live or virtually live is not something that happens every day. And to have all of that in one place. My mom helped start an NLP center when I was growing up, so I saw a few of those NLP greats and heard about many more as a kid. So to have access to them is really wonderful. And then to meet the people who are new to NLP and who are developing new things actively, that freshness, that energy is so inspiring to be around.
Yeah.
And hopefully is something all of us all over the planet are trying to facilitate in our own local communities too.
Yes, and we know that previous conferences have generated some amazing collaborations that we then hear about sort of years later. There's two trainers who met at the conference, one in Canada and one in the UK, and they've collaborated on various projects since. And it's such a wonderful breeding ground for that collaboration and fellowship.
And, you know, surprisingly too, there was a virtual component back in 2011, 2012. Mm-hmm. Shelley Rose Charvet was on a panel, but she wasn't there. Yeah. So she was on this gigantic screen and the other panelists were there. And it was really, you know, I was thinking back on my first virtual experiences or blended experiences, and that one really stands out.
Yeah, yeah.
We also had in 2018, I believe, we had Frank Future that was unable to attend because there was some problem on his way to the airport. So we set up very quickly a Skype session on the big screen in one of the big rooms. So and it was fantastic that technology was just able to flip in to give some people the experience of one of the greats of NLP, as you were saying.
Well, I'm really curious about that because one of the things I learned from the Shelley, virtual panel was that the submodality of size is key. Because if somebody is really big or really, really little compared to the others, you have a different experience of that. So that's actually guided. I've done a few short blended things since then. And I've been like, okay, you got to make everybody's head roughly the same size. And then it works. Or, you know, if you want to feature someone, make them bigger. Have you had any experiences with that, Cash?
Well, Frank's head was huge on this enormous screen. And I think with the greatest respect and love for Shelley Rose, she's always going to be small, isn't she, really?
That's really.
I think you're right. I think that Zoom and other technologies are quite good at scaling, and depending on how far the camera is away, I think we're all getting quite a good perspective on where we need to sit and what we need to do.
And so you're using Hoover for the conference, right?
Yes.
How's that been, Cash? Whenever I'm looking or sharing about a conference like this, I'm always like, okay, do we have to learn another thing now? I'm trying to access my learner state, but I mean, you must have chosen that for a reason.
It's been our conference app for the last 3 years for the in-person conferences.
Okay.
They switched very swiftly to a virtual platform and integrated Zoom into it. So Zoom is actually the delivery mechanism for the presenter. The delegates will see everything through Hoover, through a mini screen or through full screen. But what that gives us is all the networking and community and chatting and question and answer sessions, exhibitors, the whole, as close as possible to an in-person event. And we get the virtual streaming as well. So it's as good as we can possibly give. We intend for the delegates and for the presenters. So whilst there is some kind of additional learning for you to do, it's minimal. If you can adapt and be flexible, as NLP people generally are, then you can do this. And we're running sessions for presenters and for delegates to make sure that there's familiarity before we actually run into the conference proper.
Yeah, so next week, well, we launch the conference app for presenters next Monday.
I saw that.
Yeah, and then we launch it for delegates the following Monday, the 26th. So there's a good, which is not what you would normally get at an in-person conference. You basically have to turn up on the day and hope you can find the right room and all that sort of thing. Whereas we're opening the conference to delegates 3 weeks beforehand, so they can practice. How do I find the sessions? Where's the program? Where's the interaction? Where's the chat? All of those things we'll be doing beforehand, so that by the time we get to the actual launch of the conference on the 14th, it's our intention that everybody will be familiar with their surroundings already. And we certainly hope that to be the case, because there are only 4 of us in the ANLP team, the conference team. So if we suddenly have 400 delegates, 500 delegates phoning us on Friday morning saying I can't get in, there's only 4 of us to answer the phones. Hence preparing.
Oh yeah, and people have shown themselves to be so flexible and so willing and happy to connect in a new way. That's really fun.
Yeah,
so
we've used it, as Cash said, we've used the app in previous years for mainly for the networking side of things, because it's absolutely wonderful at an in-person conference. You can have a chat 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or with a small group, but via the app you can, there's an opportunity to generate sort of chat rooms for people so after your presentation or before your presentation, there's an opportunity for somebody can set up a chat room for those who are interested in night walking, and they can all drop in there like their own mini Zoom session to have conversations about what's it like, and you can set up a room and have
just like for real before or after a session, the chit chat. Nice.
Yeah,
oh, that's neat.
Hoover provides that. Hoover provides a kind of an inbuilt Zoom session, but it's a Hoover native session that you can have up to 30 people with. You can have an unlimited number of topics and meetings. So yes, it will be an opportunity for presenters and delegates to get together and actually see people in talking, not just on chat, on text.
Nice.
There's lots of exciting things to come.
Yeah.
So have we got anybody on?
We've had a couple of people in. We don't have any questions.
Okay.
And I will say, Katie, that I am absolutely intrigued, and this is another one, doggy.
I'm talking in the background.
I'm absolutely intrigued about your presentation. I will be watching it avidly several times, but once the recordings are available.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Well, thank you. That means so much to me. And I hope that this material is really helpful to people and brings some of NLP from Texas and New Mexico there, and also this history with Nelson Zink and the book The Structure of Delight and everything he's brought to us too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I said, we're really looking forward to it. Just to remind everybody who's watching now or will be watching later, Katie is presenting Introduction to NightWalking at the NLP Conference on Sunday, the 16th of May, 16:30. That's British summertime. So, morning for you, Katie, but no too unruly hours for anybody. So thank you again, Katie, for joining us this afternoon. It's been lovely to see you again after all these years, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation in May.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you, Katie. Take care.